Welcome to another episode of the Brighter Web Podcast, insights on growing a small business using the latest technology and marketing best practices. I am Robert Carnes, joined as always by my co-host, Mickey Mellon.
Hey, good to be here, Robert. Looking forward to this one.
Absolutely. This is a topic I think we both like to talk about.
Yep, just got a new Kindle yesterday, actually, the new Kindle Paperwhite, so It's like 10% bigger or whatever. Like, hey, I'll take it. It's a little bit better readings.
The latest and fanciest in the reading and book-related technology. So if you haven't clued on or you don't know what a Amazon Kindle is, we are talking about books and what books that any marketer should read. So obviously we're releasing this episode at the end of 2021 as we go into the beginning of 2022, a new year. People creating their to-read lists, setting goals for themselves for what they want to read for the new year. So we thought we'd help you out a little bit by coming up with a couple different suggestions of what books that you should read, probably as a business leader or as a marketer.
Yep.
So, Mickey, why don't you maybe kick us off with one of your book suggestions of what you think people should be reading?
Okay, and this is the latest one I finished. It was Think Again by Adam Grant. We both love Adam Grant. He's fantastic. He has a podcast called Work Life that is worth listening to. It's one of those podcasts where some of the titles of the episodes don't appeal to me, but I still listen because it's always fantastic content. And Think Again, it was just about how to look at situations and think about it from different angles and always be open to new ideas. And it was one of the best books I've read in quite a while. I think as I blog quite regularly, and I think I came up with 14 blog post topics out of that book that I'll be unpacking over the next few months. So Think Again by Adam Grant was excellent.
Yes, Adam is definitely one of those thought leaders that I follow. Listen to his podcast, I've read all his books. He's definitely somebody that I would encourage people to check out. And Think Again, his latest book was definitely worth reading.
For sure. So what's your first one?
So Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull is probably one of my favorite nonfiction books of all time. I definitely had to list that as number one. It's if you don't know who Ed Catmull is, not surprising, but I think you've heard of the company that he founded called Pixar, which obviously now owned by Disney and produces some incredible, beautiful movies and films and now even shorts and TV. And this Creativity Inc. is the backstory of how Ed got into computer science and computer illustrations, and then how he founded Pixar with Steve Jobs and that whole backstory. But it's also an incredible look at how to lead creative people, which I thought was really interesting because, again, he's a computer scientist, he's a data guy, he's all analytical and stuff, but he just has some incredible insights on how to work with creative people and how to get stories written and all that stuff. So it works on just a lot of different levels, and just something I would encourage anybody to read.
For sure, I read it a couple years ago. It was fantastic, and just seeing that behind the scenes of Pixar and how they handle the creativity and manage it and put stories together was just fascinating. It was a great read for sure.
Absolutely. So Mickey, what is your next book suggestion?
So I went from my newest book I've read to one of the oldest ones on the list, I think probably, is Getting Things Done by David Allen, an old classic. But it really, I said before, I don't think Green Melon exists without that book, because at the time I was working a full-time job and trying to start this on the side a little bit and working with my friend Allie and and I was just a mess. I was not well organized. For as sharp as I think I am now in terms of inbox zero and lists and all that, that was a disaster 15 years ago. And Getting Things Done really helped shape and just get me organized on how to manage all that stuff. And what's neat is, even though it's an old book, even back then I was a little disappointed, but now it's brilliant. He doesn't talk about specific tools or platforms or any of that, just overall systems of organization. So it's still relevant today, and just getting things organized and knocking them out. So I
think those are always the books that have the longest shelf life, when they can be timeless in that way, and that can be applicable to all the latest processes and all the latest tools that you're using, but then have those principles that you can apply in any case and can be read 10, 15, 20 years down the road and still apply. And I've got one of those type of books on my list as well that we'll get to a little bit later.
Getting Things Done was great because when it came out, I think I was using Noseby which was great. It was a fantastic program, and I've since gone to other programs. We've done the Full Focus Planner, and that's what's great is the processes from this book work anywhere, and it's fantastic. So Getting Things Done by David Allen. So your next one?
Well, I don't think I could have done this episode without including this title on the list. So Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, which is, a lot of marketers are familiar with both of those names. StoryBrand is the business owned by Donald Miller, and he's written a couple other books and has done workshops and all sorts of things built around this idea. But building a story brand is the foundational idea behind StoryBrand, and establishing your business as a guide and treating your audience like the hero and using these kind of storytelling principles in order to do marketing and business better. So it's been around for a couple of years. It's pretty well known, but again, I think it's one of those same ones that has timeless principles that any business can pick up and use. And thankfully, there's a lot of other ways to consume it. You can listen to Donald Miller's podcast and get a lot of those same ideas. But if you want to get the full effect of the concepts, which again we use very much here at Green Melon when we're helping businesses create their messaging and their branding, we use a lot of the story brand principles when it comes to doing that.
Yeah, I think around the office, there's no doubt we talk about that book more than any other book. And really, I keep a half a dozen copies on our shelf here because we give it away all the time too. When people don't know what it is, like, here you go read it because it's fantastic.
Yes.
And yeah, absolutely a must read for any marketer.
Sure. So what is your third book suggestion for us, Mickey?
So the next one is called The Go-Giver by Bob Berg. And it goes back to, the concept is really about just going out and being a giver in the world and helping people and how the helping comes full circle. And that's really how we handle marketing too, is giving away our secrets and giving away tips and knowing it all works back around. It's just a good overview of how Bob runs his life, and it really is a great way to look at things. So.
Yeah, interesting. That is not one that I've heard of before, so yeah. I'm adding to my own to-read list here, which is
had to get something on your list, because as much as I read, I consider myself a pretty avid reader. You're well beyond me, so getting anything on my list that you haven't read is a win. So.
Sure. Well, hey, there are definitely more books that I haven't read than the ones that I have, so
there you go.
Always stuff to add. And not to sneak another book in there, but Adam Grant's first book was actually called Give and Take, which is that similar concept. So if you don't like Think Again, you can try Adam Grant's other book, which I think is somewhat related to The Go-Giver by Bob Burg.
Yep, there you go. Awesome. So what's your next one?
So the next book that I talk about, which is very closely related to I love writing. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
And so Everybody Writes by Hadley is a great book that I read a couple years ago. It's very practical. It's got a lot of very overarching general writing principles that you can use, but it also delves into the details of specifics around how to write for LinkedIn and how to write for email and how to write a good blog post. And it gets very into the weeds and practical. And Anne Hadley is another one of those thought leaders that I follow. She's got a good email newsletter that I actually follow every week. I've heard her speak in person before, and she was fantastic. She's one of the big names in content marketing, and so obviously writing is a huge piece of that. And this is her manifesto almost, if it were, on how to write well for marketing. So it's a very practical guide, and I think one of those ones that I keep on my bookshelf and I'll pull out to refer to frequently because it's so hands-on.
Awesome. That's not one I've read yet, so that's on my list to take care of this year too. So.
All right, so what is your next list or book for us on your list?
This is another one I read in 2021, finally. I've heard about for years, but How to Take Smart Notes by Sonke Ahrens. His name is spelled a little interesting, but if you search for How to Take Smart Notes, you'll find it. And it's more of a textbook than a casual reading book, but the last couple of years I've really been working on my note-taking, not for client meetings where we just kind of jot stuff down, but really unpacking books and those things as I'm developing blog posts and that. And his concepts on how you take smart notes is fantastic and really unpacks things like the idea of the Zettelkasten and little note cards and string notes together and how you just connect all your thoughts and can build things out. And it's a fantastic read there. Again, not an exciting one. It is very, very technical and stuff, but it really did shape how I handle my notes and help me tighten up my systems quite a bit. So
referring to it as a textbook, I'm sure gets people really excited when it comes.
It's not a textbook, but it is a normal nonfiction book, but it feels more.
Oh, of course. There are definitely plenty of those books that are longer and get more technical and all that stuff that you really want to have at hand, not to read it all in just one setting and really be inspired by it. But hey, I'm going to pick this up when I need a specific reference to a skill or something like that. So that sounds like that's one of those books.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It puts it in there. So How to Take Smart Notes by Sonke Ahrens. Your next one?
Is Jab, 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 Right Hook by the Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary V. Again, Vaynerchuk is another difficult one to spell, but if you look up Gary V or Jab, 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 Right Hook, he will come up because he is, as always, all over social media, all over the internet, a very big name for a lot of people in marketing. Huge personality. I like him. You have to take him in small quantities
for sure
as an individual because he is high energy all the time. So lots of videos out there of his stuff. Good podcast. But Jab, 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 Right Hook is really about social media. I would say it's probably been around for 10 years now, and it's still the best social media book that I have found. Even with an industry, a category of digital marketing platforms like that change so often, that are always so different, all the details have changed so much since he wrote and published that book. But nevertheless, again, because the principles are so foundational, because the ideas behind what he's saying are so just instrumental in how he's built his brand, I think any business, especially a business that wants to get into like influencer marketing or whatever with social media, could learn a lot from this. And as a quick explanation of what that title is, because that's
right, yeah.
a very interesting and grabbing title, his whole idea is you want to, just like a boxer, jab people with value-added content, and then your right hook is your sales pitch, right? Don't always try to land haymakers with a bunch of sales pitches. You have to jab people and put them in the right position first so that you can land that big punch and really make a big sale.
Yeah, it was a great analogy for that title. And it was a fantastic book. It's one I think I read twice now because I read it like 10 years ago and had forgotten most of it, so hit it again with smart notes behind it this time. So
it's a good one to revisit time to time. So, all right, what is your fifth and final book suggestion for us today?
So this is probably the least technical in a way. It's more of a story, but it's Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson. So Walter Isaacson writes just amazing biographies of people, and his biography of Steve Jobs was exceptional. Going through the story, I've probably read or listened to the Steve Jobs story like a dozen different ways from podcasts and different things, but Walter just does a phenomenal job. And it's interesting, tying back to your first one, which was Creativity Inc. One fun anecdote from the book is that Steve Jobs' wealth today, is the family's wealth, is like 80% from Pixar and just a little bit from Apple, just because Pixar was such a huge success. You think of him as the Apple guy, but really it's interesting where Pixar fit in. But it's really more about how he dealt with things at Apple and how he really turned the ship around, because Apple was so close to being gone.
It's true.
And then they're the most valuable company in the world, depending what day of the week it is. So it's a fantastic book. So really anything by Walter Isaacson, but starting with Steve Jobs by him is a good place to be.
And like you said, Steve Jobs, obviously a huge figure in our country, in our pop culture, in marketing and digital world. His story has been told in a bunch of different ways. I have never actually read this biography. Obviously, it's very well known, and it's been on my list for a while. This is the push that I need to actually dive into it. But I have read different bits and pieces of Steve Jobs' story in books like Creativity Inc. And obviously there's been films made about him and all that stuff, but this is the authority, the go-to book when it comes to learning the story of this interesting and complicated man.
And what is your last one?
So, Deep Work by Cal Newport. Cal Newport's he's a professor, I believe, of psychology or computer science. So he's a very smart guy, delves into a lot of very technical things, but has written some very soft and approachable and very practical books. Deep Work is just one of those, and it's very well regarded on getting away from multitasking, trying to moving our brains back and forth from 1,000 different things, and actually trying to focus on a lot more singular things and actually delving deep into a topic rather than trying to say surface level. He gets into a lot of the psychology and the cognitive science of it, which is still, he does a very good job. That's a heady topic to dive into, but he does a really good job of making it practical and accessible and giving a lot of very practical advice on how to do. So I won't try to get into any of those tips here, but they are very, very helpful. We've done a lot of things, when it comes to blocking our calendars with deep work time. It's another thing to actually try to stick to that and get deep work done. It's a hard thing to do in this digitally connected world of ours, but it's a hugely important principle. I think it will help people get a lot more work done. It seems like you get a lot more work done if you were multitasking, but you get a lot better work done and more work done if you use a lot of these deep work principles that Cal Newport unpacks in this book. Yeah,
you said the word principles a few times. That really is where the book is so good, though. He does a great job of course, saying why it's important, but then giving you a lot of great practical tips for making it happen. And frankly, Robert, you're one of the best people I've seen that does block out your time and stick to it and really do the deep work. And really, your role here requires that, and you do a great job of it, and it pays off for sure.
A lot of that was because I got guilted into it by reading this and going, okay, I know a lot of people talk about these things, but if I'm going to actually get work done and make a difference and all those things, you have to stick to it. So it's a good way to hold you accountable. A lot of the things aren't surprising. Things like don't multitask, block things on your time, but seeing the science behind it and the results, the positive things that can come out of sticking to it really actually helped me put it into practice.
Yep. So that was Deep Work by Cal Newport. So there's your 10 books for today, and then I think in the show notes we'll list those 10 books with links and stuff, but we also have a few dozen others we'll probably put in there. I mean, we didn't talk about people like Seth Godin or Malcolm Gladwell or so many other fantastic authors that we have. So we'll list a few more books in there that we find as some of our favorites. So
it was tough to just limit it to 5 apiece.
For sure, yeah.
I could have a list of 100 books that you should read, but sometimes it's a lot better just to stick to the top ones. And I really do think we got the cream of the crop here.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of the cream of the crop that got left out. So
Right.
like you said, we'll leave those in the show notes and,
for
and
sure.
give you plenty of ideas to start from.
There you go.
So if you have been, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Brighter Web Podcast, brought to you by Green Melon, a digital marketing agency. To help your business keep up with the latest digital marketing trends, check us out at greenmelon.com. You can also find show notes and more episodes at abrighterweb.com.